I need like a recap. Okay, we're on page 20, or chapter 29, page 282. Oh, right, the last thing that happened was, like, Eleanor went back home, right? And, like, went to her library. It was, like, from her point of view. And she, like, her whole house was burnt. Basically, all her books were burnt. Not her house, but her books. The guys, Basta and everybody went in there and burnt up her shit. And that was, like, the last thing to happen. I don't know where Maggie and them were last, though. I'm trying to find that. I really thought we were ahead of this. Looks like Finoglio and them, like, they had just met Dustfinger up, and Dustfinger didn't want to be met, so they, Dustfinger, like, ran away. Now Mo, Finoglio, and the little grandchildren are all together. Okay. So, what are we reading? We're reading this. There should be a command for it, too. For a book or something, I think. It's, Cornelia Funk's Inkheart. She's got 3 books. We're gonna read all 3, but I'm on the first one right now. Thank you, Muse. Alright, so this excerpt is from Peter Pan. What do you know? Don't have a mother, he said. Not only he had no mother, but he had not the slightest desire to have one. He thought them very overrated persons. Felt. The apartment that Finoglio rented to Taurus was only 2 streets away from his own house. It had 2 rooms plus a tiny bathroom and a kitchen. Since it was on the ground floor, it was rather dark, and the beds creaked when you lay down in them. What the fuck? Whatever. All the same, Maggie slept well, or anyway, better than Capricorn's damp straw or in the hovel with the ruined roof. Mo slept only fitfully. Maggie was woken twice on that first night by tomcats fighting out in the street, and both times she saw him lying there with his eyes open, arms folded behind his head, looking at the dark window. He got up very early in the morning and went to buy food for breakfast in the little shop at the end of the street. The rolls were fresh and warm, and Maggie really did almost feel as if they were on vacation when Mo and she drove to the nearest town of any size to buy the basic tools of his trade. Brushes, knives, fabric, stout cardboard, and truly gigantic ice creams, which they ate together in a cafe by the sea. Maggie still had the taste of the ice cream in her mouth as they knocked on the door of Finoglio's house. God, I really want some fucking ice cream, man. This is, like, too much. The old man and Mo drank another cup of coffee in his green kitchen before he took Mo and Maggie up to the attic where he kept his books. I don't believe it, said Mo, outraged, standing in front of Finoglio's dusty bookshelves. They should all be sized on the spot. When did you last come up here? I could scrape the dust off their pages with a towel. With the trowel. I had to put them up here, said Finoglio defensively, signs of a guilty conscience lurking among his wrinkles. I was getting so short of space downstairs with all those shelves, and anyway my grandchildren were always pulling them around. They could hardly have done as much damage as the damp and dirt up here, said Mo. Finoglio went downstairs again, looking crestfallen. You poor child. Is your father always so strict? He asked Maggie as they climbed down the steep staircase. Only about books, she said. Finoglio disappeared into a study before she could ask him any questions, and his grandchildren were at school or playgroup, so she got the books that Eleanor had given her and sat down with them on the flight of steps leading into Finoglio's tiny garden. Wild roses grew so thickly there that you could hardly take a step without feeling their shoots twine around your legs. And from the top of the step you could see the sea, far, far away yet looking very close. Maggie opened up the book of poems. She had to narrow her eyes because the sun was shining in her face so brightly, and before beginning to read, she looked over her shoulder to make sure Mo hadn't followed her down. She didn't want him to catch her at what she was planning to do. She was ashamed of it, but the temptation was just too great. When she was perfectly sure no one was coming, she took a deep breath, cleared her throat, and began. She shaped every word with her lips, the way she had seen Mo do it, almost tenderly, as if every letter were a musical note and any word spoken without love were a discord in the melody. But she soon realized that if she paid too much attention to every separate word, the sentence didn't sound right anymore, and the pictures behind it were lost if she concentrated on the sound alone and not the sense. It was difficult, so difficult, and the sun was making her drowsy, until at last she closed the book and held her face up to its warm rays. It was silly of her to try anyway, very silly. Later that afternoon, Pippo, Paula, and Rico came back, and Maggie walked around the village with them. They bought things in the shop where Mo had gone in the morning, sat on a wall on the outskirts of the village, watched ants carrying pine needles and flowers, and counted the ships sailing by on the distant sea. A second day passed like this. Now and then Maggie wondered where Dustfinger could be and whether Farid was still with him, how Eleanor was, and if she began to wonder where they were. There was no answer to any of these questions, and Maggie didn't find out what Finoglio was doing behind a study door either. Chewing his pencil, Paula told her when she had managed to hide under her grandfather's desk, just chewing the end of his pencil and walking up and down. I need some fucking water. Need some fucking water. I'm thirsting to death. Welcome in, people. We're reading right now. What's up, North? Nobody saw that. It's okay. Mo, when are we going to Eleanor's house? Maggie asked on their second night. When she sensed that yet again he couldn't sleep, she perched on the edge of his bed. The bed creaked just like hers. Soon, he said. Go to sleep now, okay? Do you miss her, my mother, I mean? Maggie herself didn't know why she asked that question out of the blue. All of a sudden it was there on the tip of her tongue and had to be spoken aloud. It was a long time before Mo answered. Sometimes, he said at last. In the morning, at midday, in the evening, at night, almost all the time. Maggie felt jealousy digging in its little... Oh my fucking god. I can't read! I took too long of a break and now my mouth doesn't work. Come on! Okay, now I'm thinking too hard about it. And there's some deers over here. Let's take a break and look at the deers. Y'all want to see them? This is dope. Hold on. Be cool the fuck up. Are you guys seeing this? Pretty dope. I don't have my chat with me. Neat. Is this boring to y'all? Because I'm super not bored with this. My camera's pretty good. Does he know I'm looking at him? What did you see in 4K? North? Where did they go? I lost them. Are they gone? I guess we're done deer watching. Oh shit. Is that a duck? Looking like a pretty day out there. Gross, they killed a mosquito. Ew. Yeah, I guess they left. I don't know. Totally lost them. That was fun. Right then. Did I finish this? Damn, that sucks. Okay. Okay. I got this. Wrong way. This way. This way. Yeah. This is so hard to do. Y'all don't even understand. Okay. Okay. My fucking neck just popped twice. I don't know if y'all heard that. Why is this so tight now? Like, what's happening? Okay. No! Fucking hell. That's why. Okay. I'm so tired. If I say that one more time, I want to punch myself in the face. Where was I? Okay. Oh, fuck. Mo, when are we going to Eleanor's house? Maggie asked on their second night when she sensed that, yet again, he couldn't sleep. She perched on the edge of his bed. The bed creaked just like hers. Soon, he said. Go to sleep again now, okay? Do you miss her? My mother, I mean? Maggie herself didn't know why she asked that question out of the blue. All of a sudden, it was there on the tip of her tongue and had to be spoken aloud. It was a long time before Mo answered. Sometimes, he said at last. In the morning, at midday, in the evening, at night, almost all the time. Maggie felt jealousy digging its little claws into her heart. She knew that feeling. She felt it every time Mo had a new girlfriend. But how could she be jealous of her own mother? Tell me about her, she said quietly. I don't mean the made-up stories you used to tell. She used to search her books for a suitable mother, but there were hardly any mothers in her favorite stories. Tom Sawyer, no mother. Huck Finn, ditto. Peter Pan and the Lost Boys, not a mother in sight. Jim Button was motherless too. And all you found in fairy tales were wicked stepmothers, heartless, jealous stepmothers. The list could go on forever. That had often comforted Maggie in the past. It didn't seem particularly unusual not to have a mother, or at least not in the book she liked the best. What do you want me to tell you? Mo looked at the window. The tomcats were fighting outside again. Their yells sounded like babies crying. You look more like her than me, I'm glad to say. She laughs like you, and she chews a strand of her hair while she's reading, exactly the way you do. She's nearsighted but too vain to wear glasses. I can understand that. Maggie sat down beside him. His arm hardly hurt him now. The bite from Basta's dog had almost healed, but there would always be a scar, pale as the scar Basta's knife had left 9 years ago. What do you mean? I like glasses, said Mo. I don't. Go on. She lifts stones, flat, smooth stones that fit comfortably into the hand. She always has 1 or 2 of them in her pocket, and she weights down books with them, especially paperbacks. She doesn't like the covers to stick up in the air, but you were always taking the stones away and rolling them over the wooden floor. And then she was cross. Oh, I don't know. She took your fat little neck until you let go of the stones. Mo turned around to look at her. Do you really not miss her, Maggie? I don't know. Well, only if I'm feeling angry with you. About a dozen times a day, then? Don't be so silly. Maggie dug her elbow into his ribs. They both listened for any sounds in the night. The window was open just a crack, and it was... The tomcats had fallen silent, probably licking their wounds. For a moment, Maggie thought she could hear the sea breaking in the distance, but perhaps it was only the traffic in the nearby highway. Where do you think Dustfinger is gone? The darkness enveloped them like a soft cloth. I'll miss the warmth, she thought. I really will. I don't know, said Mo. His voice sounded absent. A long way off, I hope, but I'm not sure. Nor was Maggie. Do you think that boy's still with him? Farid. She liked his name. I expect so. He was running after Dustfinger like a dog. He likes Dustfinger. Do you think Dustfinger likes him? Mo shrugged his shoulders. I don't know who or what Dustfinger likes. Maggie rested her head against his chest, the way she always used to at home when he was telling her a story. He still wants the book, doesn't he? She whispered. Basta will make mincemeat of him if he catches him. He must have gotten a new knife by now. Someone was coming along the narrow alley. A door opened and was closed again. A dog barked. If it wasn't for you, said Mo, I'd go back too. Crazy ass dudes. Why would y'all go back there? Hey, thanks, Spork. We're on chapter 30, guys. It's called Talkative Pippo. Page 288. This excerpt is from The Princess Bride again. We've had a lot from them. But yeah, another one. Whatevs. We were told there was a village nearby that might enjoy our skills. You were misinformed, Buttercup told him. There is no one, not for many miles. Then there will be no one to hear you scream, the Sicilian said, and he jumped with frightening agility toward her face. Okay. That's a scary foreshadowing. The next morning, around 10 o'clock, Eleanor called Finoglio's house. Maggie was sitting upstairs with Mo, watching him remove a book from its mildewed binding as carefully as if he were releasing an injured animal from a trap. Mortimer, Finoglio called from up the stairs. Come down at once, will you? There's some hysteria. I can't make head nor tail of it. She says she's a friend of yours. Mo put the book to one side, minus its cover, and went downstairs. Finoglio handed him the receiver with a gloomy expression on his face. Eleanor's voice was pouring rage and despair into the peaceful study. Mo himself had some difficulty in making sense of what she was saying. But how did he know? Oh, of course. Maggie heard him saying, Burned all of them? He passed a hand over his face and glanced in Maggie's direction, but she had a feeling that he was looking straight through her. "All right," he said. I need some more water. I'm getting hiccups again, I can tell. Happens every time I talk for like any amount of time. It's really weird. Hiccuping and yawning. He passed a hand over his face and glanced in Maggie's direction, but she had a feeling that he was looking straight through her. "All right," he said. "Yes, of course, though I'm afraid they won't believe a word of it, and the police down here aren't responsible for what's happened to your books." "Yes, of course. Naturally. I'll pick you up. Yes." Then he hung up. Finoglio could not conceal his curiosity. He scented a new story in the offing. "What was that all about?" he asked impatiently as Mo just stood there staring at the telephone. Rico was clinging to Finoglio's back like a little monkey. It was Saturday, but the other two children hadn't turned up yet. "What's the matter, Mortimer? Aren't you talking to us anymore? Look at your father, Maggie, standing there like a stuffed dummy." "That was Eleanor," said Mo. "Maggie's mother's aunt. I told you about her. Capricorn's men broke into her house. They swept the books off the shelves all over the house and trampled on them, and the books in Eleanor's library." He hesitated for a moment before going on. "Her most valuable books. They took them into the garden and burned them. All she found in her library was a dead rooster." Finoglio let his grandson slide off his back. "Rico, go and look for the kittens," he said. "This is not for your ears." Rico protested, but his grandfather pushed him out of the room and closed the door after him. "What makes you so sure Capricorn is behind this?" he asked, turning back to Mo. "Who else would do such a thing? Anyway, as far as I remember, the red rooster is his emblem. Forgotten your own story, have you?" Finoglio was looking downcast. No, I remember that," he murmured. "What about Eleanor?" Maggie's heart beat anxiously as she waited for Mo's answer. Luckily, she wasn't back yet when it happened. She took her time going home. Thank heavens, but can you imagine how she feels? Her finest books, my God. Well, welcome in. I feel like I need to pop my neck. Finoglio was picking up some toys from his rug with trembling fingers. "Yes, Capricorn likes fire," he said huskily. "If it was really his doing, your friend can think herself fortunate he didn't burn her too." "I'll tell her." Mo picked up a matchbox lying on Finoglio's writing desk, opened it, and slowly closed it again. "What about my books?" Maggie hardly dared to ask. "My book box. I hid it under the bed." Mo put the matchbox back on the desk. "That's one piece of good news," he said. "No one touched your book box. It's still under the bed." Eleanor looked. Maggie took a deep breath. Was it Basta who had set fire to the books? No, Basta was afraid of fire. She remembered only too well how Dustfinger had mocked him for it. But in the last resort, it made no difference which of the black jackets it had been. Eleanor's treasures were gone, and not even Mo could bring. "Eleanor is flying back down here. I'm supposed to pick her up at the airport," said Mo. "She's taken it into her head, set the police on Capricorn, and I told her I didn't think she'd have much luck, even if she had evidence that it was his men who broke into her house. How can she prove he gave the order? But you know Eleanor." Maggie nodded gloomily. Oh yes, she knew Eleanor, and she understood her rage oh too well. But Finoglio laughed. "The police? You don't get anywhere by setting the police on Capricorn," he said. "He makes his own rules, his own laws." "Oh, be quiet. This isn't a book you're writing," Mo interrupted him. "Very likely it's amusing to invent a character like Capricorn, but believe you me, it's not the least bit funny to cross his path. I'm off to the airport. I'll leave Maggie here. Look after her." And he was out the door before Maggie could protest. She ran after him, but Paula and Pippo met her coming down the street. They caught hold of her, trying to make her go with them. They wanted her to be a cannibal, a witch, a six-armed monster, the characters from their grandfather's stories with which they populated their games. By the time Maggie had finally managed to shake off their little hands, Mo had long since gone. The place where he had parked the rental car was empty, and Maggie stood in the square, alone with the war memorial and a few old men gazing out to sea with their hands in their pants pockets. Restlessly, she wandered over to the steps in front of the memorial and sat down. She didn't feel like chasing Finoglio's grandchildren around his house or playing hide-and-seek with them. She just wanted to sit there and wait for Mo's return. The hot wind that had blown through the village overnight had left fine sand on all the windowsills. The air was cooler than it had been for the last few days. The sky above the sea was still very clear, but gray clouds were forming above the hills, and every time the sun disappeared behind them, a shadow fell over the village rooftops, making Meggie shiver. A cat stalked toward her, stiff-legged and the tail erect. It was a thin little creature with ticks in its gray fur and ribs showing through its thin coat like stripes. Meggie and were speaking to it gently until it put its head under her arm and purred, asking to be petted. It didn't look as if it belonged to anyone, no collar, not an ounce of fat on it, nothing to suggest it had a caring owner. Meggie scratched its ears and chin and stroked its back as she looked down the road and went around a sharp bend as it left the village and disappeared from sight beyond the houses. How far was it to the nearest airport? Meggie propped her chin on her hands. The clouds above her were massing more and more ominously. They loomed overhead, becoming closely packed and gray with rain. The cat rubbed against her knee, and as Maggie's fingers stroked its dirty fur, an awful thought suddenly occurred to her. Suppose Eleanor's house wasn't all Dustfinger had told Capricorn about. Suppose he'd also told them where she and Mo had been living. Would they find a heap of ashes waiting for them at the farmhouse? No, she wouldn't think about that. He doesn't know, she whispered. He has no idea. But Dustfinger didn't tell him. She kept whispering it like a magic charm. After a while, she felt a raindrop on her hand, then another. She looked up at the sky. There wasn't so much as a speck of blue to be seen. How quickly the nearby sea could make the weather change. All right, I'll just wait in the apartment, she thought. We might even have some milk there for the cat. The poor thing weighed no more than a small damp towel. Poor little cat. Meggie was afraid of breaking something when she picked him up. It was pitch dark in the apartment. Mo had closed the shutters that morning so the sun wouldn't make it too hot. Meggie was shivering and wet from the fine drizzle when she entered the cool bedroom. She put the cat down on her unmade bed, slipped much too big for her, and went into the kitchen. The milk carton was almost empty, but if she diluted what was left with a little warm water, there was just enough for a saucerful. The cat jumped down so quickly when Meggie put the milk out on the floor beside the bed that it almost fell over its own paws. Rain was falling harder and harder outside. Meggie listened to it drumming on the paving stones. She went over to the window and opened the shutters. The narrow strip of sky, visible between the rooftops, was as dark as if the sun were about to set. Meggie went over to Mo's bed and sat down on it. The cat was still licking the saucer, its little tongue greedily rasping over the flower-patterned china, hoping for a last delicious drop. Meggie heard footsteps out on the street, then a knock at the door. Who was that? Mo couldn't possibly be back yet, or had he forgotten something? The cat disappeared, probably to hide under the bed. Who's there? called Meggie. Meggie, a child's voice called back. Of course, Paula or Pippo. Yes, it must be Pippo. They probably wanted to go looking for ants with her again, even though it was raining. A gray paw emerged from under the bed and patted her shoelace. Meggie went out into the tiny hall. I don't have time to play just now, she called through the closed door. Please, Meggie, begged Pippo's voice. Sighing, Meggie opened the door and found herself looking straight into Basta's face. Well, well, who do we have here? He asked in a menacingly soft voice, his fingers around Pippo's thin little neck. What do you say to that, Flatnose? She doesn't have time to play. Basta pushed Meggie roughly aside and came through the door with Pippo, followed of course by Flatnose, whose broad shoulders would hardly fit through the doorway. Let go of him, Meggie snapped at Basta, although her voice shook. You're hurting him. Am I indeed? Basta looked down at Pippo's pale face. Not very nice of me, is it? Especially since he showed us where you were hiding. With these last words, he squeezed Pippo's neck even more firmly. Do you know how long we lay in that filthy hovel? He snarled at Meggie. She took a step backward. A very long time. Basta emphasized the word, putting his foxy face so close to Meggie she could see her reflection in his eyes. Isn't that right, Flatnose? Those damned rats almost nibbled off my toes, he growled. Wouldn't I just love to twist this little witch's nose until it's pointing the wrong way around? Later, maybe. Basta pushed Meggie into the dark bedroom. Where's your father? He asked. This little lad, he said, letting go of Pippo's throat and prodding him in the back so roughly that he stumbled against Meggie, told us he's gone out. Gone out where? Shopping. Meggie could hardly breathe. She was so frightened. How did you find us? She whispered. But she instantly knew the answer. Dustfinger, of course. Who else? But why had he betrayed them this time? Dustfinger, replied Basta as if he read her thoughts. It's just too easy to find that fellow. There aren't so many crazy jugglers in this world who go around breathing fire and have a tame marten, not to mention one with horns. So we only had to ask around a little, and once we were on Dustfinger's trail, we were also on your father's, of course. We arrived just in time to see you drive away from the hotel parking lot, and we certainly have paid you a visit before now if this fool, he said of pain, hadn't lost sight of you on our way here. We searched almost a dozen villages, wore out our voices asking questions, ran ourselves off our feet until we finally got here, and one of those old fellows who spends all day staring out to sea remembered Dustfinger's scarred face. Where is he? Is he, out shopping too? Asked Basta with a scornful twist of his mouth. Bad. He went away, she replied tonelessly, ages ago. So Dustfinger hadn't given them away after all. Not this time, and he'd slipped through Basta's fingers. Meggie could almost have smiled. You burned Eleanor's book, she said, holding Pippo close. He was speechless with terror. You'll be sorry you did that. Oh, Willie, Basta smiled unpleasantly. I wonder why. As far as I know, Cockrell had a lot of fun with those books, but that's enough talk. We don't have forever. That boy, he said, pointing at Pippo, who retreated as if Basta's forefinger were a knife, has told us some strange stories about a grandfather who writes books, and a book in which your father took a particular interest. What the fuck, Pippo? I guess this chapter is called Talkative Pippo. What the fuck, though, Pippo? Fucking told everybody everything. Spilled every bean. I'm so fucking thirsty. I left my lid open. Wait, what am I doing? Man. Meggie swallowed. Stupid Pippo. Stupid talkative little Pippo. Lost your tongue, asked Basta. Should I squeeze the little boy's neck again? Pippo began crying and buried his face in Mo's sweater. Meggie stroked his curly head comfortingly. His grandfather doesn't have the book you're thinking of anymore, she told Basta. You and your friend stole it long ago. Her voice sounded hoarse with hatred, and her own thoughts sickened her. She wanted to kick Basta, hit him, and stab him in the stomach with his own knife. The brand new knife he wore stuck on his belt. Stole it, just imagine. Basta grinned at Flatnose. I think we'd better make sure of that for ourselves, don't you? Flatnose nodded distractedly, looking around him. Hey, hear that? There was a scratching sound under the bed. Flatnose knelt down, pushed the hanging edge of the sheet aside, and poked around under the bed with the barrel of his gun. Spitting, the gray cat shot out of hiding, and when Flatnose tried to grab it, the cat raked his ugly face with his claws. He leaped to his feet with a yelp of pain. I'll wring its neck, he bellowed. I'll break that cat's neck. Meggie was about to stand in his way as he lunged for the cat, but Basta got in first. You'll do no such thing, he spat at Flatnose as the gray cat disappeared under the dresser. Killing cats is unlucky. How often do I have to tell you? Nonsense. Superstitious garbage. I've wrung several of the brute's necks already, said Flatnose angrily, pressing one hand to his bleeding cheek. And has my luck been any worse than yours? You could drive a man crazy the way you carry on. Don't walk in that shadow. It's unlucky. Oh, watch out. You put your left boot on first. That's unlucky. God, mercy me. That means I'll fall down dead tomorrow. Shut up, snapped Basta. If anyone around here is talking nonsense, it's you. Get those children to the door. Pippo clung to Meggie as Flatnose forced them into the corridor. Why are you bawling like that? He growled at the little boy. We're off to see your grandfather now. Pippo never let go of Meggie's hand once they stumbled after Flatnose. He was clutching it so hard with his stubby fingernails digging into her skin. Oh, she thought, why didn't Mo listen to me? Why couldn't he have gone home? It was still raining heavily. Raindrops ran over Maggie's face and down her neck. The streets were empty. There was no one around to help them. Basta was walking just behind her when she heard him quietly cursing the rain. When they reached Finoglio's house, Maggie's feet were wet through and Pippo's curls were plastered to his head. Pippo won't be home. Perhaps he won't be at home. God, I'm just having the worst fucking time reading today. And it's making me so sleepy. Like, where's the sunshine? Okay. Where was I? It was still raining heavily. Raindrops ran over Maggie's face and down her neck. The streeps. Fucking hell. I'm gonna make it through this chapter at least. The streets were empty. There was no one around to help them. Basta and she heard him quietly cursing the rain. When they reached Finoglio's house, Maggie's feet were wet through. I was so past this. Whatever. And Pippo's curls were plastered to his head. Perhaps he won't be home, Maggie hoped. She was just thinking about what Basta would do then when the red door opened and Finoglio stood facing them. What on earth do you children think you're doing, running around in weather like this? He said angrily. I was just going out to look for you. Come on in and hurry up. May we come in too? Basta and Flatnose had been standing on either side of the door with their backs to the wall so that Finoglio wouldn't see them immediately, but now Basta moved up behind Maggie and put his hands on her shoulders. Finoglio stared at him in surprise as Flatnose stepped forward and planted a foot in the open doorway. Pippo scurried past him, nimble as a weasel, and disappeared into the house. Oh my goodness, I'm so thirsty. Yeah, this chapter is long. I want to make it through it at least. I still got like 7, 8 pages, 9 pages. I can do this. Maybe I should switch positions. How did I... This way. Yes. Okay. Who are these people? Finoglio looked at Maggie as crossly as if she had brought the two strangers there of her own free will. Friends of your father's. Maggie mopped up the rain on her face and looked back at him with equal reproach. You ought to know them better than I do, she said. Basta's fingers were digging into her shoulders. Know them? Finoglio looked at her blankly. Then he studied Basta's face froze. Good heavens above, he murmured. I don't believe it. Paula peered out from behind his back. Pippo's crying, she announced. He's hidden in the cupboard. Well, you go back to him, said Finoglio, never taking his eyes off Basta. I'll be with you in a minute. How much longer are we going to stand out here, Basta? Growled Flatnose. Until we shrink in this rain. Basta, repeated Finoglio without stepping aside. Yes, that's my name, old man. Basta's eyes always narrowed when he smiled. We're here because you have something that interests us a great deal. A book. Of course. Maggie almost burst out laughing. He didn't know. Basta didn't know who Finoglio was. How could he? How could he know that this old man made him up out of paper and ink, made up his face, his knife, his evil nature? That's enough talk, growled Flatnose. The rain's running into my ears. He brushed Finoglio aside like a troublesome fly as he pushed past him into the house. Basta followed with Maggie. Pippo was still sobbing inside the kitchen cupboard. Paula was standing in front of it, talking to him soothingly through the closed door. When Finoglio came into the kitchen, he faced nervously. It was as dark and dismal as ever. Sitting down at the table, Finoglio beckoned Paula over without a word. Well, where is it? Basta looked around, scanning the room, but Finoglio was too deeply absorbed in the sight of his two creations to reply. He couldn't take his eyes off Basta in the particular, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I told you, there's no copy of it here, replied Maggie for him. Maggie replied for him. Where was I? Basta acted as if he hadn't heard her and gestured impatiently to Flatnose. Look for it, he ordered. Grumbling, Flatnose obeyed. Meggie heard him trampling up the narrow wooden staircase that led to the attic. Right, little witch. How did you and your father find the old man? Basta prodded her in the back. How did you know he was still had as a copy? Meggie cast Finoglio a warning glance, but unfortunately he was as ready to talk as Pippo, who had so willingly told Basta all about her and his grandfather. How did they find me? I wrote the book, announced the old man proudly. Perhaps he expected Basta would instantly fall on his knees before him, but Basta only gave a pitying smile. Oh, yes, of course you did, he said, taking the knife from his belt. He really did write it. Meggie couldn't resist saying so. She wanted to see the fear that had turned Dustfinger pale when he heard about Finoglio appear on Basta's face, too. But Basta just smiled again and began carving notches in Finoglio's kitchen table. Who thought up that story, he asked. Your father? You think I look stupid? Everyone knows that stories and books are as old as the hills and were written by people dead and buried long ago. He jabbed the blade of the knife into the wood, pulled it out, and jabbed it in again. Flatnose was trampling around overhead. Dead and buried, how interesting. Finoglio sat Paula on his lap. Did you hear that, Paula? This young man believes all books were written in the distant past by dead people who were picked up in the stories from heavens knows where. Plucked straight from the air, maybe? Paula couldn't help giggling. It had grown very quiet in the cupboard. Pippo was probably listening at the door, holding his breath. What's so funny about that? Basta reared up like a snake when someone had trodden on its tail. Finoglio ignored him. Smiling, he looked down at his hands, as if remembering the day when he had begun to write Basta's story. Then he looked straight at him. You always wear long sleeves, don't you? He said. Should I tell you why? Basta narrowed his eyes and looked up at the ceiling. Damn it all, why is it taking that idiot so long to find a book? Finoglio looked at him, his arms folded. Easy, he can't read, he said quietly. You can't read either, unless you've learned by now. None of Capricorn's men can read, any more than himself can. Basta drove the knife so far into the soul that he had difficulty pulling it out again. Of course he can read. What are you going on about? He leaned threateningly over the table. I don't like the way you talk, old man. Why don't I carve a few more wrinkles in your face? Finoglio smiled. Perhaps he thought Basta couldn't hurt him because he, Finoglio, had made him up. Meggie wasn't so sure of that. You wear long sleeves, Finoglio continued very slowly, as if giving Basta time to take in every single word, because your master likes playing with fire. You burned both arms right up to the shoulders when you obeyed his orders and set fire to the house of a man who had dared to refuse his daughter to Capricorn. Ever since then, someone else had set the fire, and you confined yourself to playing games with knives. Basta jumped up so suddenly that Paula slid off Finoglio's lap and hid under the table. Like to make yourself out to be clever, do you? He growled, holding his knife under Finoglio's chin. Well, all you've done is read the wretched book. Well? Finoglio looked him in the eye. The knife under his chin didn't seem to scare him half as much as it did Meggie. Oh, I know all about you, Basta, he said. I know you'd give your life for Capricorn any day, and you're always hungry for his praise. I know you were younger than Meggie when his men picked you up, and ever since you've loved him like a father. But shall I tell you something? Capricorn thinks you're stupid and despises you for it. He despises you all, his devoted black-clad sons. Although it's his own doing that you're still so ignorant, and he wouldn't hesitate to set the police onto any one of you if it was to his advantage. Are you quite clear about that? Hold your filthy tongue, old man. Basta's knife came alarmingly close to Finoglio's face, and for a moment Meggie thought he would slit his nose. You don't know anything about Capricorn. Only what you read in the stupid book. I think I ought to cut your throat now. Have a good day, Ghost King, if you're still here. Bye. It's raining again. Okay. Wait, what did I just read? Oh, right. Wait, Basta whirled around to look at Meggie. And you keep out of this. I'll deal with you later, you little toad, he said. Finoglio's hands were pressed to his own throat. He was staring blankly at Basta, having at last realized he was by no means safe from the man's knife. But you can't kill him. Really, you can't, cried Meggie. If you do... Basta's thumb stroked the blade of his knife. If I do, then what? Desperately, Meggie searched for the right words. What would she say? Oh, what? Because Capricorn would die too, she managed. Yes, that's it. You'd all die. You and Flatnose and Capricorn. If you kill this old man, you'll all die because he made you up. Basta's lips twisted in a scornful smile, but he lowered his knife, and for a moment, Meggie even thought she saw a hint of fear in his eyes. Finoglio cast her a relieved glance. Basta stepped back, examined the blade of his knife closely as if he had discovered a mark on it, then rubbed it clean on the hem of his black jacket. I don't believe a word of it, he said. But this is such a weird story, I think Capricorn might like to hear it too. So, he added, giving the shiny blade a last... What does that mean? I think it meant to say polish, but it says poish, like P-O-I-S-H. Giving the shiny blade a last polish before snapping the knife shut and putting it back in his belt. We won't take only the book and the girl, we'll take you too, old man. Meggie heard Finoglio draw in a sharp breath. She herself was so scared she wasn't sure if her heart was beating at all. Take them away. Basta was going to take them away. No, she thought. Oh, please no. Take us away where? Asked Finoglio. Ask the girl here. Basta pointed mockingly at Meggie. She and her father have had the honor of being our guests already. Bed and board thrown in. But this is nonsense, cried Finoglio. I thought it was the book you wanted. We didn't know we didn't know there was supposed to be another copy. No, we were just sent to bring Silvertongue back. Capricorn doesn't like his guests to leave without saying goodbye, and Silvertongue's a very special guest. Isn't that right, sweetheart? Basta winked at Meggie, but he isn't here, and I have better things to do than hang around waiting for him. So I'll take his daughter, and he'll come chasing after her of his own accord. Basta went up to Meggie and pushed her hair back behind her ears. She makes pretty bait, wouldn't you say? He asked. Oh yes, old man, take it from me. If we have this little creature, we'll have her father too. He'll come like a dancing bear led by a ring in his nose. Meggie struck his hand aside, trembling with fury. Don't you do that again, Basta whispered in her ear. Meggie was glad that Flatnose came trudging downstairs in this moment. He appeared at the kitchen doorway, breathless and with several books under his arm. Here, he said, dumping them on the table. They all begun with a single upright stroke, followed by the 3 up and down lines, just the way you drew it. He put a stained piece of paper down beside the books. The letters I and N were clumsily traced on it, and it looked as if the hand that set them down had found the task very difficult. Basta spread the books out on the table and pushed them apart from one another with his knife. These are no good, he said. Is that thunder? Oh, hey, it's really gray over there again. I guess I'm gonna get, like, another little bit of storm. Pushing off... Okay, what the fuck I read? These are no good, he said, pushing 2 off the table so that they landed on the floor with crumpled pages. Nor are these. 2 more landed on the floor, and finally Basta swept the rest off the table too. Are you quite sure there isn't another one beginning like that? He asked Flatnose angrily. Yes, I'm sure. You better not be wrong, because I do assure you you'll be the one to pay for it, not me. Flatnose cast a worried look over the books at his feet. Oh, and another little change of plan with us as well. Basta pointed his knife at Finoglio, so he can tell the boss his amazing stories. Very entertaining, and just in case he's hidden a book, so we'll have plenty of time to ask him about that once we get back. You keep your eye on that old man, and I'll watch the girl. Flatnose nodded and hauled Finoglio up from his chair, but Basta reached for Meggie's arm. Back to Capricorn, she had to bite her lips to stop herself from bursting into tears as Basta dragged her to Finoglio's kitchen door. No, Basta wouldn't see her weep, and she wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. At least they haven't got Mo, she thought, and suddenly there was only one thought in her head. Suppose he crossed their path before he left the village. Suppose he came to meet them on his way back with Eleanor. And all at once she couldn't wait to get away, but Flatnose had paused in the doorway. What about the little girl and the crybaby in the cupboard? He asked. Pippo's sobs died away, and Finoglio's face turned even whiter than Basta's shirt. Right, old man, what do you think I'm going to do with them? Asked Basta scornfully. You say you know all about me. Finoglio couldn't utter a word. Every cruel deed with which he had ever credited Basta with was probably going through his head. Basta relished the fear on his face, and for a few delicious minutes, then he turned to Flatnose. The other two children stay behind, he said. Our little madam here will do. With difficulty, Finoglio recovered his powers of speech. Paula, go home, he said, as Flatnose forced him down the hall. Do you hear? Go home at once. Tell your mother I've gone away for a few days, all right? We'll just look in at the apartment again, Basta said as they were standing in the street outside. I forgot to leave a message for your father. I mean, he ought to know where you are, don't you think? I feel like he's gonna know. I mean, what the hell? First day you saw the blinds closed? Really? I gotta close them whenever it's like too bright because it just looks like a big white hole back there. It's like the sun has to be over here and it has to be dark back there. Basically. But I don't know. It's pretty rainy today. What kind of message will it be, thought Maggie, when you can scarcely write 2 letters together? But of course she didn't say so out loud. She was terrified the whole time that Mo might come to meet them. But when they reached the front door of the apartment, there was only an old lady walking down the street. One word out of you, and I'll go back and wring both children's necks. Muglio, as the old lady slowed down. Hello, Rosalia. Rosalia? 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 That sounds better. I feel like that's it. Rosalia. Said Finoglio huskily. Guess what? I have new tenants for my apartments. How about that, then? The suspicion vanished from Rosalia's face, and a moment later she had disappeared around a corner of the street. Maggie opened the door, and for a second time let Basta and Flatnose into the apartment, where she and Mo felt so safe. In the hall she remembered the gray cat and looked around anxiously, but it was nowhere to be seen. The cat has to go out, she said when they were in the bedroom, or it'll starve to death. That's unlucky. Basta opened the window. Right, it can get out now, he said. Flatnose snorted scornfully, but this time he made no comment on Basta's superstitious nature. Can I take some clothes? Asked Maggie. Flatnose just grunted, and Finoglio looked unhappily down at himself. I could do with the change of clothes too, he said, but no one took any notice. Basta was just busy with his message. Carefully, with the tip of his tongue between his teeth, he was gouging his name in the wood of a dresser with his knife. Basta. Mo would understand that only too well. Maggie hastily stuffed a few things in her backpack. She kept on Mo's sweater. She was about to put Eleanor's 2 books in with the clothes, but Basta knocked them out of her hand. Those stay here, he said. Mo did not return in time to meet them as he walked to Basta's car. All that long, endless way, he didn't appear. Okay, we're on page 307 now, and I'm probably done reading for a minute.